You are a fraud, Mr. Knight. A thief wrapped in Armani. I didn't do it. They're lying. Sit down and shut your mouth, or I will hold you in contempt until you rot. The billionaire was weeping. The lawyer was leaving. The judge was laughing. It was over. The gavel raised for the final strike until a voice, low and thunderous, cut through the silence like a blade. I object! It wasn't a lawyer. It was the man holding the mop. The air in the Superior Court of New York smelled of lemon polish and decaying dreams. It was a sterile, cold scent that Cole Knight had never noticed from the boardroom of Knight Industries. But here, in the defendant's chair, it was the only thing keeping him from vomiting. Cole, a man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes and Time as the tech messiah of the decade, looked small. He was 32, but under the harsh fluorescent lights of courtroom 4B, he looked 50. His bespoke Navy suit, usually a suit of armor, now hung loosely on his frame, a testament to the 15 pounds he'd lost since the indictment. Mr. Knight, please look at the jury when I address you, Prosecutor Freya Vance said. Her voice was not loud, it was surgical. She didn't need to shout to eviscerate a man, she just needed to peel back his skin layer by layer. Freya Vance was a predator in stilettos. She moved across the courtroom floor with a predatory grace, holding a stack of financial records as if they were holy scripture. Her eyes, sharp and devoid of warmth, locked onto Cole. She smelled blood in the water, and Cole knew he was bleeding out. This is the ledger from the Knight's Shield charity fund, Freya announced, turning to the jury. She held the document up, her manicured finger tapping a red column. $200 million, meant for orphanages, meant for inner-city schools. Gone. She whipped her head toward Cole. Funneled into offshore accounts that trace directly back to shell companies owned by you. I didn't authorize those transfers, Cole shouted, standing up. His hands shook. I don't even have the access codes for that server. Sit down, Mr. Knight, Judge Blair Lawson barked. Judge Lawson was an institution. A heavy-set man with a face carved from granite and a temperament to match, he had no patience for theatrics. He viewed his courtroom as a machine, and Cole Knight was a wrench thrown into the gears. Lawson leaned over the bench, his black robe bunching around his shoulders. One more outburst, and I will revoke your bail faster than you can check your stock portfolio. Is that understood? Cole sank back into his chair. He turned desperately to his left. Do something, he hissed at his attorney. Object. She's leading the narrative without proof of intent. His attorney, a high-priced litigator named Marcus Thorne, didn't even look up from his notepad. Marcus was doodling. He was drawing cubes. Relax, Cole. Let her punch herself out. She's not punching herself out, Marcus. She's killing me. Behind the rail in the gallery sat the public and the vultures. Reporters scribbled furiously on notepads. But directly behind the defense table sat two people who mattered most. One was Brielle Underwood, Cole's fiancée. She was weeping into a silk handkerchief, her blonde hair perfectly cascading over her shoulders. Every time the jury looked at her, she let out a soft, heartbroken sob. It was perfect. Too perfect. Next to her sat Alexander Carter. Alexander was Cole's CFO, his best friend since college, and the man who was currently running Knight Industries in Cole's absence. Alexander looked grave. He patted Brielle's hand consolingly, shaking his head at Cole's back with a look of profound disappointment. The prosecution calls Alexander Carter to the stand, Freya Vance announced. Cole stiffened. It's okay, he whispered to himself. Xander will clear this up. He knows the server architecture. He knows I couldn't have done the bypass. Alexander took the stand. He swore to tell the truth. He adjusted his tie, looking every bit the reluctant witness, the loyal friend forced to do the unthinkable. Mr. Carter, Freya began, walking closer to the witness stand. You were the CFO. Did Mr. Knight have access to the charity accounts? Alexander sighed, a heavy, tragic sound. He looked at Cole, his eyes wet. I wanted to believe he didn't. I tried to protect him. Mr. Carter, answer the question. Yes, Alexander said softly. Cole insisted on having a God key, a master override code. He said it was for security, but I found the logs. He used the key at 3 a.m. on the night the funds vanished. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Liar! Cole screamed, leaping to his feet. The chair clattered backward. You're lying, Xander. You have the key. You're the only one who has it. Order! Order! Judge Lawson slammed the gavel down, the sound cracking through the room. Mr. Thorne, control your client. Marcus Thorne grabbed Cole's arm, pulling him down, but his grip was weak, uninterested. Cole, stop it. You look guilty. I look guilty because I'm being framed by my best friend. Cole's eyes were wild. He looked at Alexander, begging for a sign of a joke, a prank, anything. But Alexander just looked down at his lap, playing the part of the betrayed brother perfectly. Freya Vance smiled. It was a small, tight smile. She turned to the jury. The witness has identified the defendant as the sole holder of the override key. No further questions. As Alexander stepped down, he walked past the defense table. For a split second, the mournful expression vanished. He locked eyes with Cole, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It was a smirk, a micro-expression of pure, unadulterated triumph. Cole felt the cold chill of reality settle into his bones. This wasn't a trial. It was an execution. And everyone, the judge, the prosecutor, his best friend, his fiancée, was holding a knife. He was alone, or so he thought. Landon Jennings squeezed the gray water from the mop into the yellow bucket on wheels. Squeak, slosh, drip. He stood in the back corner of courtroom 4B, near the heavy oak doors, blending into the wood paneling. He was 62 years old with skin the color of deep mahogany and hair that had turned the color of steel wool. He wore a gray jumpsuit with the name Landon stitched in fraying red thread over his pocket. To the people in the room, Landon was furniture. He was less than furniture. Furniture had a purpose. Landon was just a biological mechanism for removing dust and trash. Prosecutors walked past him without seeing him. Judges looked through him. Defense attorneys stepped over his wet floor signs without breaking their stride. But Landon saw them. He saw everything. He dipped the mop back into the bucket, his movements rhythmic and slow. His knees ached, a sharp, grinding pain from 40 years of labor. But his eyes were clear and sharp. They were hunter's eyes, observant and intelligent, hiding behind the mask of a tired old janitor. He watched Freya Vance strut back to her table. He saw the way she checked her reflection in the screen of her phone when she thought no one was looking. Vanity. He watched Judge Blair Lawson checking his watch every 3 minutes. Impatience. The judge had a tea time or a dinner reservation, and justice was merely an obstacle to his schedule. But mostly, Landon watched the defense table. He had been cleaning this courtroom for 10 years. Before that, he had cleaned offices. And before that, well, that was a lifetime ago. A life buried under mistakes and tragedy. But the mind didn't forget. The mind that had once devoured case law and logic puzzles was still there, ticking away beneath the gray hair. Landon had been listening to the night trial for 3 days. He cleaned during recess. He lingered in the back during the sessions, pretending to fix a loose hinge or polish a brass rail. He knew Cole Knight was innocent. It wasn't a hunch. It was in the details. Landon had watched the body language. When a man lies about stealing $200 million, he creates barriers. He crosses his arms. He touches his nose. He leans away from the accuser. Cole Knight did none of that. Cole leaned forward. He exposed his neck. He was desperate to be understood, not to hide. And then there was the fiancée, Brielle Underwood. Landon moved his bucket slightly to the left, getting a better angle on the gallery. He watched Brielle. She was dabbing her eyes with the handkerchief, but Landon noticed that the handkerchief was dry, and her left hand, the one resting on the bench, was tapping a rhythmic pattern. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It was a nervous tick, but not grief. It was anticipation. Landon's gaze shifted to Alexander Carter, the best friend. Landon had seen Alexander in the hallway earlier that morning, before the session started. Alexander had been on a call, pacing near the water fountain Landon was scrubbing. "It's done," Alexander had whispered into his phone. "Thorne is rolling over. Yeah, the offshore transfer is confirmed. We're popping champagne by Friday." Landon had kept his head down, scrubbing the same spot of linoleum until it shone, burning the words into his memory. Thorne is rolling over. Landon looked at Marcus Thorne, Cole's lawyer. The man was practically asleep. He hadn't objected to hearsay. He hadn't challenged the chain of custody on the digital logs. He was letting Freya Vance walk all over his client. It was a setup, a fix, a tragedy in slow motion. Landon felt a familiar burn in his chest. It was the old fire, the fire he had extinguished 20 years ago when he walked away from his old life. He told himself he was done with the law. He told himself that the system was broken, rigged for the rich and the ruthless, and that a man like him, a man who had made one fatal mistake, had no place in it. "Keep mopping, Landon," he told himself. "It's not your business. You need this job. You have rent to pay. You have a quiet life. Don't make noise." He pushed the mop across the floor, the gray strings absorbing the invisible dirt of the courtroom. "Mr. Thorne, do you have any cross-examination for the witness?" Judge Lawson asked, looking bored. Marcus Thorne stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He looked at Alexander Carter, then at the judge. "No, Your Honor. The defense rests its questioning." Cole gasped. The sound was audible all the way to the back of the room. "What? Marcus! You have to ask him about the server logs. Ask him about the IP addresses." "Sit down, Cole," Marcus whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch it. "It's over." "It's not over! I'm innocent!" "Mr. Knight!" Judge Lawson roared. "This is your final warning." Landon's grip on the mop handle tightened. His knuckles turned ash gray. He felt the injustice physically, like a weight pressing on his lungs. He looked at Cole Knight, a man who had everything, now stripped of his dignity, surrounded by wolves. It didn't matter that Cole was a billionaire and Landon was a janitor. In this room, at this moment, they were the same. They were men being crushed by a lie. Landon remembered the promise he had made to his mother on her deathbed. "Truth is the only thing you own, Landon. Don't let them take it." He looked at the judge. He looked at the smug prosecutor. He looked at the smirking Alexander Carter. The system was broken. But maybe, just maybe, it could be fixed. Or at least, interrupted. Landon pushed the bucket against the wall. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit. He wasn't supposed to speak. If he spoke, he would lose his job. He would lose his pension. He might even go to jail for disrupting court proceedings. But he watched Cole Knight put his head in his hands, shaking with the realization that his life was ending. Landon took a breath. The air still smelled of lemon polish, but now it also smelled of ozone. The smell of a storm coming. The tension in the courtroom was a physical thing, a taut wire ready to snap. "The defense rests," Judge Lawson repeated, his eyebrows raising in surprise. Even he seemed shocked by the incompetence. "Mr. Thorne, you are declining to call any witnesses? You are declining to present an alternative theory of the crime?" Marcus Thorne shrugged. "The evidence is overwhelming, Your Honor. My client has no defense." Freya Vance couldn't hide her glee. She gathered her papers, preparing for a closing argument that would be a victory lap. Cole Knight looked at his lawyer with horror. "You're fired," he whispered. Then he screamed it. "You're fired! I want a new lawyer! I want a mistrial!" "Mr. Knight, you cannot fire your counsel in the middle of closing proceedings just because you dislike the strategy," Judge Lawson said, rubbing his temples. "We are finishing this today. Ms. Vance, begin your closing." "No!" Cole stood up, knocking his chair over again. "I won't let you do this. I represent myself then. I'll do it myself." "You are not qualified, Mr. Knight," Lawson sneered. "And you are currently hysterical. Bailiffs, restrain the defendant." Two heavy-set officers in uniform moved toward Cole. Cole backed away, his eyes darting around the room, looking for a savior. He looked at Brielle. She turned her face away. He looked at Alexander. Alexander shook his head sadly. "Please," Cole begged. "Is there no one who cares about the truth here?" The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the heavy footsteps of the bailiffs closing in. Clang. The sound of a mop handle hitting the floor echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned toward the back corner. Landon Jennings stood there. He had dropped his mop. He stepped over the wet floor sign. He walked past the back row of benches. He walked past the reporters. "Hey, you!" one of the bailiffs shouted, distracted from Cole. "Janitor, get back to the wall!" Landon didn't stop. He walked with a limp, his left knee stiff, but his back was straight as a rod. He walked through the gate that separated the gallery from the court floor. "Stop right there!" Judge Lawson bellowed, his face turning red. "What do you think you are doing? Security, remove this man!" Landon stopped 10 feet from the defense table. He looked at Cole Knight, whose eyes were wide with confusion. Then he looked up at the bench. "I object," Landon said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and resonated with a power that didn't match his jumpsuit. Judge Lawson blinked. A few people in the gallery giggled. Freya Vance looked at him with amusement. "You object?" Lawson asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're the janitor. You are emptying the trash cans, not filing motions. Get out of my courtroom before I have you arrested for trespassing." "I object to the ineffective assistance of counsel," Landon said, louder this time. "And I object to the continued prosecution based on evidence that has been clearly tampered with." The laughter died instantly. Freya Vance's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" Landon pointed a calloused finger at Marcus Thorne. "This man is not representing his client. Under Strickland v. Washington, a defendant has a right to counsel that meets an objective standard of reasonableness. Sitting there drawing cubes while the prosecution introduces hearsay disguised as business records is not reasonable. It is malpractice. And given the glance he just exchanged with the witness, Mr. Carter, I'd argue it's collusion." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Cole Knight looked at the janitor as if he were an angel descending from heaven in a stained gray jumpsuit. Judge Lawson leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You know Strickland?" "I know the law," Landon said, "and I know that Mr. Knight is being railroaded." "This is absurd," Freya Vance scoffed, stepping forward. "Your Honor, this man is clearly disturbed. He's a janitor. He's probably off his medication. Remove him." "I am not disturbed," Landon said calmly. He turned to Cole. "Mr. Knight, your lawyer has abandoned you. The court says you cannot represent yourself because you lack the expertise. You need counsel." Yes," Cole stammered. "Yes, I do." Landon turned back to the judge. "Then I request to be admitted as counsel for the defense." Now the laughter returned, harsh and mocking. The reporters were typing furiously. "Janitor tries to play lawyer." "You?" Judge Lawson let out a short, barking laugh. "You want to defend a billionaire in a federal fraud case? Do you have a law degree, Mr. Jennings? Landon Jennings." Landon held the judge's gaze. "And I don't need a degree to stand here. I need the defendant's permission and the court's discretion." "You need to be a member of the bar," Lawson shouted. "Actually, Your Honor," Landon said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. Under the precedent of State versus Eubanks, in emergency circumstances where a defendant is being actively denied competent counsel and faces immediate incarceration due to gross negligence, the court has the discretion to allow a next friend or lay advocate to assist, provided they demonstrate sufficient legal knowledge. I am demonstrating it now. Landon took a step closer to the bench. I know that Ms. Vance just introduced a server log that had no timestamp authentication. I know that Mr. Carter's testimony about the God key contradicts his own deposition given 3 months ago, where he claimed he designed the security protocols. And I know that if you let this trial end today, you aren't serving justice. You're serving a conspiracy. Lawson stared at him. The reference to State versus Eubanks was obscure, incredibly obscure, but it was real. Lawson knew it because he had written a paper on it 20 years ago in law school. The judge looked at the janitor with new eyes. He saw the intelligence. He saw the posture. This wasn't a crazy person. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Mr. Knight, Judge Lawson said, his voice quiet. Do you wish to dismiss Mr. Thorne? Cole looked at Marcus Thorne, who was pale and sweating. He looked at Alexander, who looked furious. Then he looked at Landon, the man with the gray hair and the mop bucket behind him. Yes, Cole said. I fire him. And Lawson hesitated. Do you wish for Mr. Jennings, the janitor, to speak for you? Cole didn't hesitate. He saw the fire in Landon's eyes. It was the first time in 6 months someone had looked at him without contempt. Yes, Cole said. I want him. I want him to defend me. I will defend him, Landon's voice boomed, sealing the contract. Judge Lawson sat back, steepling his fingers. He looked at Freya Vance, who was fuming. He looked at the chaos in his courtroom. And for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of curiosity. Very well, Lawson said, a cruel smile touching his lips. He wanted to see this train wreck. He wanted to see the janitor fail and burn. Mr. Jennings, take off that jumpsuit. You have until tomorrow morning to review the discovery. Court is adjourned until 9 a.m. The gavel slammed down. Landon didn't smile. He turned to Cole Knight. Mr. Knight, Landon said, reaching out a rough, scarred hand. My name is Landon. We have a lot of work to do. And we're going to start by taking out the trash. Cole took his hand. Thank you, he whispered. Who are you? Landon looked over Cole's shoulder at Alexander Carter, who was glaring daggers at them. I'm the guy who cleans up the messes, Landon said. Let's get to work. The ride to Landon's apartment was silent. Cole Knight, a man used to the leather-wrapped interior of a Maybach, sat in the passenger seat of Landon's rusted 2004 Ford Taurus. The suspension groaned over every pothole in Queens, a stark contrast to the smooth glide of Cole's former life. Why are you doing this? Cole asked, breaking the silence as they pulled up to a faded brick tenement building. You don't know me. You could lose your job. Landon cut the engine. The car shuddered and died. He looked at Cole, his eyes reflecting the streetlights. I didn't lose my job, Mr. Knight. I threw it away. There's a difference. They walked down a narrow concrete stairwell into the basement. The air was damp, smelling of old paper and boiled cabbage. Landon unlocked a heavy steel door and pushed it open. Welcome to my firm, Landon said dryly. Cole stepped inside and froze. It was a boiler room, converted into a living space. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, hissing softly. But the walls were lined with bookshelves made of cinder blocks and wooden planks. And on those shelves were thousands of books. Black's Law Dictionary, Federal Rules of Evidence, Constitutional Law, Corporate Governance. Some were taped together, some were stained with coffee. I found most of them in the recycling bins of the law firms I cleaned, Landon said, walking over to a small kitchenette to put a kettle on. Lawyers throw away perfectly good knowledge just because a new edition comes out. The law changes, Mr. Knight, but the principles, they stay the same. Cole ran a hand over the spine of a worn copy of Torts. Who are you, Landon? Really? Landon sat in a worn armchair, motioning for Cole to take the wooden stool. 30 years ago, I wasn't a janitor. I was a senior paralegal at Sterling and Holloway. I didn't have the degree, couldn't afford law school, but I had the brain. The partners, they used me. I wrote their briefs. I found their loopholes. They took the credit and I took the paycheck. Landon's face hardened. Then came the Driscoll case, a chemical company poisoning a town's water supply. I found the memo that proved they knew. My boss told me to shred it. He said if I did, I'd get a bonus that would pay for my son's college. Cole watched him, captivated. What did you do? I didn't shred it. I gave it to the opposing counsel anonymously. Landon stared at the hissing kettle. They traced it back to me. The firm didn't just fire me, they framed me for embezzlement, petty cash, office supplies, enough to get me a felony record, enough to ensure I'd never work in a law office again. My wife left. My son, he died in a car accident a year later. I had nothing. Landon poured 2 cups of tea. I spent 20 years scrubbing floors, Mr. Knight, but I never stopped reading. I never stopped watching. I saw men like Marcus Thorne every day, lazy, arrogant, compromised. And I saw you. You saw a fraud, Cole said bitterly. No, Landon shook his head. I saw the Knight's Shield charity. I saw you building schools in places the government forgot. A thief doesn't build foundations, he builds escape routes. I knew you were innocent. And when I saw Alexander Carter looking at you today, I saw the same look my boss gave me 30 years ago. Landon slammed a thick binder onto the small table between them. It was the discovery file Cole had managed to grab before leaving the court. We have 12 hours, Landon said, his voice shifting from reflective to commanding. Freya Vance is going to lead with the technical evidence tomorrow, the server logs. We need to find the crack in the wall. There is no crack, Cole said, putting his head in his hands. The log shows my unique encryption key was used. It's a 256-bit rotating hash. Only I have it on my phone, and my phone was in my pocket. Landon opened the file. He put on a pair of reading glasses that were missing one arm. Mr. Knight, in my experience, the lie isn't in the technology. The lie is in the human who operates it. Walk me through the night of the theft, minute by minute. For the next 8 hours, they worked. The billionaire and the janitor, huddled under a single bare light bulb in a basement in Queens. Cole explained the intricacies of blockchain and server architecture. Landon countered with questions about custody, access, and physical security. At 4:05 a.m., Landon stopped. He was looking at a floor plan of the Knight Industries server building included in the evidence. Wait, Landon said, tapping the paper. This cooling system, it's water-cooled, right? Yes, Cole said, rubbing his tired eyes. State-of-the-art. And the maintenance logs show the system was flushed and refilled on the 14th, the night of the robbery. Routine maintenance. It's automated. Landon smiled. It was a wolfish smile. Mr. Knight, I cleaned the courthouse server room for 10 years. Nothing is fully automated. When you flush a system, you have to open the physical override valves to prevent airlocks. And those valves... Landon pointed to a blurry photo of the server room door. Are inside the secure cage. So? Landon stood up, his joints popping. If someone used your digital key remotely at 3 a.m., the system would have logged a remote login IP. But if the system was in maintenance mode for the flush, remote access is disabled to prevent data corruption. Cole's eyes went wide. My God, you're right. If the system was being flushed, the only way to transfer data would be local, Landon finished. Someone physically plugged a drive into the server rack. Someone who was already in the building. Someone who the security cameras wouldn't question. Landon closed the binder. Go to sleep, Mr. Knight. Tomorrow we go hunting. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread. The janitor attorney was the headline on every local news station. People were lined up down the hall, hoping to see the spectacle. When Landon walked in, he wasn't wearing the jumpsuit. He was wearing a suit. It was old, charcoal gray, double-breasted, clearly from the 90s, and slightly too large in the shoulders. But he wore it with a dignity that made the fabric seem like silk. He carried a battered leather briefcase he had dusted off from the back of his closet. Judge Lawson banged the gavel. He looked annoyed, perhaps disappointed that Landon actually showed up. Mr. Jennings, I trust you are ready to proceed, or would you like to return to your custodial duties? The defense is ready, Your Honor, Landon said. His voice was steady. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked only at the witness stand. Freya Vance called her next witness. The people call Kevin O'Malley, lead systems administrator for Knight Industries. Kevin was a nervous young man with thick glasses and a nervous sweat problem. He sat on the stand, wiping his palms on his trousers. Freya smiled at him. Mr. O'Malley, can you confirm that the defendant's unique encryption key was used to authorize the transfer of the $200 million? Yes, Kevin squeaked. It's in the logs. User, CKadmin. Time, 03:15 EST. And is it possible to fake this key? No, Kevin shook his head vigorously. It's quantum encrypted. It generates a new code every 60 seconds. Only Mr. Knight's personal device could generate the correct code at that exact second. Thank you, Freya said, shooting a smug look at Landon. Your witness, Mr. Janitor. Landon stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He walked to the middle of the floor, standing in the open space. He held the floor plan in his hand. Mr. O'Malley, Landon began, you are the lead administrator. That means you oversee the physical maintenance of the servers as well, correct? Yes, sir. On the night of the 14th, was there a scheduled coolant flush? Kevin blinked, confused by the pivot. Yes. Routine maintenance. And during a coolant flush, what is the standard protocol for remote connections? Kevin hesitated. Well, standard protocol is to... Usually, we keep them open. Objection, Landon barked. Perjury. I have the Knight Industries Systems Manual here, page 402. During active coolant cycling, all remote write-access ports must be suspended to prevent thermal throttling. Is that true or false? Kevin paled. It's the policy, but sometimes we override it. You override safety protocols? Landon raised an eyebrow. Interesting. But let's look at the server logs again. Exhibit D. Landon walked over to the bailiff and handed him a sheet of paper to display on the projector. It was a dense list of code. Mr. O'Malley, at 02:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the theft, there is a log entry. Crack Unit 4 failure. What does that mean? It means Computer Room Air Conditioning Unit 4 failed. And what happens when an AC unit fails in a server room, Mr. O'Malley? The ambient temperature rises. Exactly, Landon said. He turned to the jury. I know a lot about temperature control. I spent 10 years fixing the HVAC in this courthouse because the budget wouldn't pay for a repairman. When the temperature rises, humidity rises. Condensation forms on the floor. Landon turned back to Kevin. If Unit 4 failed, the floor would be wet, dangerous, a slipping hazard. And according to the building logs, a janitor was dispatched to clean it up at 3:10 a.m. Is that correct? I suppose. But here is the problem. Landon's voice dropped low. The thief logged in at 3:00 a.m. remotely, you claim. But if the AC failed at 2:55 a.m., the system automatically goes into thermal lockdown to protect the hardware. Remote access is physically cut. The only way to access the server at 3:00 a.m. would be to stand at the physical terminal. Landon slammed his hand on the railing. So, unless Mr. Knight can teleport from his penthouse to the server room, he couldn't have done it. The thief had to be in the room, standing in the water, ignoring the alarms. "Objection!" Freya Vance stood up. "Calls for speculation." "It's not speculation, it's physics," Landon roared. "Mr. O'Malley, check the local user access log, not the remote log, the one hidden in the subdirectory. Did anyone swipe a badge to enter the server room door at 2:50 a.m.? Kevin was shaking now. He typed furiously on the laptop provided to him on the stand. He stared at the screen. "Well?" Landon pressed. "There is an entry," Kevin whispered. "Read it," Landon commanded. "Badge ID AC02. And who does badge AC002 belong to?" Kevin looked up, his eyes darting to the gallery. "To Alexander Carter." "It belongs to Alexander Carter," Kevin said softly. The courtroom exploded. Judge Lawson hammered his gavel, but the noise was deafening. Alexander Carter sat stone still, his face a mask of rage. "No further questions," Landon said, buttoning his jacket. He walked back to the defense table and sat down. Cole looked at him, stunned. "How did you know about the AC failure? It wasn't in the binder." Landon leaned in. "I didn't, but I know that building. They use the same cheap condensers as this courthouse. They always fail during a flush. I gambled." Cole grinned. It was the first time he had smiled in months. The momentum had shifted. The air in the courtroom was no longer heavy with Cole's guilt. It was electric with the possibility of a conspiracy. Freya Vance looked rattled. She was pacing behind her table, whispering furiously to her assistants. "They're going to pivot," Landon whispered to Cole. "They can't rely on the tech anymore. They're going to go for the character assassination. They're going to bring out the fiancé." "Brielle won't lie," Cole said, though his voice lacked conviction. "She loves me. She's just confused." "Mr. Knight," Landon said gently, "love doesn't testify for the prosecution unless it's been bought. The prosecution calls Brielle Underwood." Brielle walked to the stand. She was dressed in black, like a widow. She looked fragile. When she looked at Cole, she burst into fresh tears. "Ms. Underwood," Freya began, her voice soft and sympathetic. "I know this is hard, but the jury needs to know. Did the defendant ever speak to you about his financial troubles, about the temptation to use the charity money?" Brielle dabbed her eyes. "Yes," she sobbed. "A few months ago. He said Knight Industries was leveraging too much debt. He said he needed a bridge loan. He joked that the charity account was just sitting there doing nothing." "He joked about stealing from orphans?" Freya asked, feigning shock. "He said it wasn't stealing if he put it back," Brielle said, her voice trembling. "He was so stressed. I told him not to do it. I begged him. That night, the night of the robbery, he left bed at 2:30 a.m. He went to his study. He locked the door. When he came back, he was shaking. He told me, 'It's done, Bree. We're safe.'" The jury looked at Cole with disgust. The technical evidence was one thing, but this was a confession to a lover. "Your witness," Freya said, confident she had repaired the damage. Landon stood up slowly. He didn't take any notes with him. He walked up to the stand and rested his hands on the wooden rail. He looked at Brielle until she squirmed. "Miss Underwood," Landon said politely, "you say Mr. Knight left the bed at 2:30 a.m.? "Yes." "And he returned when?" "Around 3:30 a.m. "And during that hour, you stayed in bed?" "Yes, I was terrified." "You didn't make any phone calls? You didn't text anyone?" "No, I was crying." Landon nodded. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce a piece of evidence that was not in the original discovery, but which I obtained this morning via a subpoena to the Verizon Wireless Corporation." Freya Vance jumped up. "Objection! Surprise evidence!" "It goes to impeachment of the witness, Your Honor," Landon said calmly. "It is admissible." "Allow it," Judge Lawson ruled, leaning forward. Landon held up a single sheet of paper. Ms. Underwood, this is your call log from the night of the 14th. It shows a call placed at 2:45 a.m. A 15-minute call. Brielle froze. Her tears stopped instantly. Who did you call, Ms. Underwood? I don't remember. Maybe my mother. You called a burner phone, Landon said. A prepaid number. But here's the interesting thing about prepaid phones. If you top them up with a credit card, they become traceable. I traced the top-up payment for that burner phone. Landon turned and pointed directly at the gallery. It was paid for by a corporate card registered to Alexander Carter. The gallery gasped again. Alexander Carter stood up and stormed out of the courtroom, pushing past the bailiff. Ms. Underwood, Landon continued, his voice rising. Why were you talking to your fiancé's best friend on a burner phone at 2:45 a.m. while your fiancé was supposedly committing a crime in the next room? Brielle stammered. Her mask was slipping. The grieving fiancé was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. I'll tell you why, Landon said. Because you were the lookout. You weren't in bed crying. You were coordinating. You called him to tell him Cole was asleep, but you made a mistake. You said Cole left the bed at 2:30, but the alarm system on the penthouse, which I also checked, shows the bedroom door wasn't open between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Landon leaned in close. Cole never left the bed, did he? You lied. You're lying right now. He made me do it, Brielle screamed, pointing at the empty space where Alexander had been sitting. Xander said Cole was going to crash the company. He said we had to save the assets. He promised no one would go to jail, that Cole would just get probation. No further questions, Landon said quietly. As Brielle dissolved into hysterical sobs on the stand, admitting to the conspiracy, Cole Knight stared at her. His heart was breaking, but his name was clearing. Judge Lawson banged the gavel. Order! Order in this court. Bailiff, take Ms. Underwood into custody for perjury pending further investigation. The session ended in chaos. Landon and Cole walked out of the courthouse side by side. The reporters were a swarm, shouting questions. Mr. Jennings! Mr. Jennings! Are you accepting new clients? Landon ignored them. He led Cole to the side exit, the one used by staff. You did it, Cole said, shaking his head. I don't know how to thank you. I'll pay you whatever you want. Millions. I don't want your money, Cole, Landon said, lighting a cigarette with a shaking hand. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him exhausted. I just want to finish the job. We proved reasonable doubt. But Alexander is still out there, and rich men don't go down easy. They reached Landon's car, but as Landon reached for his keys, a black SUV screeched to a halt, blocking them in. Two men in suits got out. They weren't lawyers. They were wide, thick-necked, and held themselves with the heavy gravity of violence. Mr. Jennings, one of them said. Mr. Carter would like a word, privately. We have nothing to say to him. Cole stepped forward, trying to be the protector for once. The man shoved Cole back against the car with one hand. It was a casual, dismissive shove, but it knocked the wind out of the billionaire. The man turned to Landon. He opened his jacket, revealing a suppressed pistol tucked into his waistband. It wasn't a request, Janitor. Get in the car, or the next time you mop a floor, it'll be your own blood. Landon looked at the gun. Then he looked at Cole. It's okay, Landon said calmly. I'll go. No, Cole shouted. Go to the police, Cole. Take the evidence to the DA. Landon handed Cole his briefcase. This is just a meeting. Landon got into the black SUV. The door slammed shut. The tires squealed as the vehicle sped off, disappearing into the New York traffic. Cole stood alone in the alley, holding the battered leather briefcase, realizing that the trial was over, but the war had just begun. The black SUV smelled of expensive leather and gun oil. Landon Jennings sat in the back seat, flanked by the two silent enforcers. He didn't ask where they were going. He knew. They drove out of the city, toward the industrial docks where the skeletal frame of the new Knight Industries' future hub was being built. It was a billion-dollar project of steel and glass, currently halted due to the scandal. It was a fitting place for an empire to die, or for a man to disappear. The car stopped near the edge of the pier. The men dragged Landon out. The night wind off the Hudson River was biting, stinging his eyes, but Landon didn't blink. He adjusted his suit jacket, brushing an imaginary speck of dust from his lapel. "Move!" the lead thug grunted, shoving him toward a construction trailer that had been converted into a temporary command center. Inside, Alexander Carter was waiting. He was pacing, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked like a man who was winning the war but losing his mind. His tie was loosened, his eyes manic. "Landon Jennings," Alexander said, turning around. He took a sip of scotch, his eyes raking over the janitor. "The man of the hour, the Cinderella of the Superior Court." "Mr. Carter," Landon said calmly, "you look tired. Guilt is heavy lifting." Alexander laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "Guilt? You think I feel guilt? I feel annoyance, Landon. I feel the irritation of a man who built a Ferrari only to have a mechanic tell him the tires are flat." He walked over to a desk and picked up a heavy black duffel bag. He unzipped it and dumped it onto the table. Bundles of cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars, spilled out. $5 million, Alexander said. Cash, untraceable. "It's a retirement fund, Landon. You can go to the Bahamas. You can buy a house. You can buy your dignity back." Landon looked at the money. It was more than he had earned in 40 years of mopping floors. It was freedom. It was safety. "And what do I have to do?" Landon asked. "Simple." Alexander smiled, leaning against the desk. "You don't show up tomorrow, you disappear. The trial continues. Without your surprise evidence, the judge will declare a mistrial or Thorne will step back in. I'll handle Cole. You just evaporate." Landon walked over to the table. He picked up a stack of bills. He felt the texture of the paper. "You know," Landon said softly, "when I was a paralegal, my boss offered me $10,000 to shred that memo. 10,000. I needed it. My son needed braces. My car was broken." "Inflation," Alexander shrugged. $5 million is a better offer." Landon dropped the money back onto the pile. "I didn't take it then, Alexander. And do you know why? Because you're a fool?" "Because money is just paper," Landon said, his voice hardening. "But the truth is concrete. It's the foundation. If you build on a lie, eventually the cracks show, and I've spent my life fixing cracks." "Spare me the philosophy lesson," Alexander snapped, his face twisting. "You're a janitor. You clean toilets. You are nothing. I am offering you a way out before I have these men put you in the river." "I am not nothing," Landon said, stepping closer, invading Alexander's space. The thugs stepped forward, but Alexander held up a hand. "I am the man who knows where the dirt is hidden. You think you're smart, Alexander? You think because you wear a three-piece suit and went to Wharton you understand how the world works? You don't." Landon pointed to the corner of the trailer. "You see that shredder? The one you used to destroy the physical hard drives from the server room before you wiped the logs." Alexander froze. His eyes darted to the industrial shredder in the corner. "How do you know about that?" "Because I emptied the bin," Landon said. 2 weeks ago. I wasn't just cleaning the court, Alexander. I pick up extra shifts. I clean this construction site on Tuesdays. I saw you here. I saw you sweating, shoving pieces of plastic into that machine. You thought you were destroying evidence. You thought once it was shredded, it was gone." Landon smiled. It was a terrifying, serene smile. "But I'm a janitor. I know exactly where the trash goes. I know that this shredder doesn't cross-cut into dust. It cuts into strips, reconstructible strips." Alexander's face went pale. The glass of scotch slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. "You have it?" Alexander whispered. "I have it," Landon lied. He didn't have it. The trash had gone to the landfill days ago, but he knew men like Alexander. They were paranoid. They believed everyone was as calculating as they were. "It's with Cole right now, in that briefcase I gave him. He's not going to the police, Alexander. He's going to the encryption experts. Once they piece those drive fragments together, it's over," Alexander roared. "Kill him! Kill him now!" The thugs moved. The lead man pulled out his gun, aiming it at Landon's chest. Landon didn't flinch. He didn't close his eyes. He stared down the barrel. "Go ahead," Landon said. "Pull the trigger. But you better ask yourself, if I have the evidence against your boss, do you think I didn't leave a file on you with my lawyer?" The thug hesitated. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. And in that second of hesitation, the world exploded. The door to the trailer didn't just open, it disintegrated. A heavy loader bucket smashed through the flimsy aluminum wall, tearing the side of the trailer open like a tin can. Debris flew everywhere. The thug with the gun was knocked sideways by a flying piece of drywall. The second thug stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the blinding floodlights that suddenly bathed the interior of the trailer. "Police! Drop the weapons! Drop them now!" A swarm of tactical officers poured through the breach, their rifles raised. In the center of the chaos, stepping over the rubble, was Cole Knight. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a dark windbreaker, looking disheveled and fierce. He spotted Landon standing amidst the dust and rushed over. "Are you okay?" Cole shouted over the noise of the helicopter circling above. "I'm fine," Landon said, brushing drywall dust off his shoulder. "You're late." "Traffic," Cole grinned, his voice shaking with adrenaline. Alexander Carter was backed against the wall, his hands raised. He looked from the police to Cole, his face a mask of disbelief. "Hugh," Alexander stammered. "How did you find us? The briefcase. Landon said the evidence was in the briefcase." Cole looked at Landon, confused. Then he looked at Alexander. "The briefcase was empty, Xander. It was a decoy. I tracked Landon's phone." "His phone?" Alexander looked at Landon. "We searched him. He didn't have a phone." Landon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, cheap flip phone. "I keep a backup in my sock, Mr. Carter. Old habit from living in bad neighborhoods. I dialed 911 the moment your men grabbed me and left the line open. They've heard everything. The bribe, the threat to kill me, the confession about the shredder." Alexander's knees gave out. He slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor next to the shattered Scotch glass. "You," Alexander whispered, staring at the janitor with pure horror. "You're a demon." "No," Landon said, standing over him. "I'm the consequences." Freya Vance arrived on the scene 10 minutes later, ducking under the police tape. She looked at the devastation, at Alexander in handcuffs, and then at Landon and Cole. She walked up to them. Her face was pale. She knew her career was hanging by a thread. She had prosecuted an innocent man and nearly let a monster walk free. "Mr. Jennings," Freya said, her voice lacking its usual bite. "It seems I owe you an apology." Landon looked at her. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. "You don't owe me anything, Ms. Vance," Landon said, "but you owe the court a motion to dismiss with prejudice, and you owe Mr. Knight his life back." I will file the papers tonight," she said, looking down at her shoes. "We found the burner phones in Mr. Carter's car. It matches the call logs. It's over." As the police led Alexander away, he stopped in front of Cole. "Why?" Alexander spat. "Why trust the help over your own blood? We were brothers, Cole." Cole looked at the man he had known for 20 years. He saw the greed, the entitlement, the rot. "Brothers don't steal from orphans, Xander," Cole said quietly. "And Landon isn't the help. He's the only honest man I've met in 10 years. Alexander was shoved into the squad car. The door slammed, sealing his fate. Landon took a deep breath of the cold river air. His body was aching. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness of his age. "So," Cole said, turning to him, "you lied about the shredded drive strips?" "Of course," Landon said. "Plastic doesn't shred into strips anymore, Mr. Knight. It turns to dust. But Alexander hasn't emptied his own trash in 30 years. He didn't know that." Cole laughed. It was a real, full laugh that echoed into the night. "You bluffed a billionaire with garbage logic." "Garbage is my specialty," Landon said. "Now, if you don't mind, Mr. Knight, I have a shift at 6 a.m. and I'm going to be late." The next morning, the courtroom was different. The air didn't smell like decay anymore. It smelled of anticipation. Judge Blair Lawson sat on the bench. He looked at the empty defense table where Marcus Thorne used to sit. He looked at the prosecution table where Freya Vance sat with her head bowed. And he looked at Landon Jennings, standing next to Cole Knight. Landon was back in his jumpsuit. He had insisted on it. "The suit was a costume," he had told Cole. "This is who I am." "Mr. Jennings," Judge Lawson said. His voice was not booming today. It was respectful, measured. "I have reviewed the emergency motion filed by the district attorney's office. In light of the arrest of Alexander Carter and the discovery of the coerced testimony of Ms. Underwood, the charges against Mr. Knight are hereby dismissed with prejudice." The gavel came down. Bang! The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Cole hugged Landon, but Judge Lawson wasn't finished. "Mr. Jennings, please approach the bench." The room went quiet. Landon walked up to the heavy wooden desk. He looked up at the judge who had laughed at him only 48 hours ago. "Mr. Jennings," Lawson said, leaning down, "I looked up your file. The Driscoll case, 1994. Landon stiffened. "That was a long time ago, Your Honor." "I made some calls this morning," Lawson continued, "to the State Bar Association. It appears that the evidence used to disbar you and convict you of embezzlement was provided by a partner at Sterling and Holloway, who was later indicted for fraud himself." Landon waited. "I have issued a judicial recommendation for the expungement of your record," Lawson said, "and I have spoken to the bar. If you wish to reapply, my recommendation, and the recommendation of this court, will accompany your application." Landon felt a lump form in his throat. For 20 years, he had carried the shame of a crime he didn't commit. He had worn it like his gray uniform. "Thank you, Your Honor," Landon whispered. "No," Lawson said, extending a hand over the bench, a gesture unheard of. "Thank you. You reminded this court that justice isn't about the procedure. It's about the truth. Now get out of here before I hold you in contempt for cleaning my floors too well." Landon shook the judge's hand. He walked back to Cole. They walked down the center aisle, the flashbulbs blinding them. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, the world was waiting. "So," Cole said, shielding his eyes from the sun. "What now? You getting your license back? Partner at a big firm?" Landon looked at the city skyline. He looked at the people rushing by. Lawyers, bankers, construction workers. "I don't think so," Landon said. "What?" Cole looked shocked. "But you're a brilliant lawyer. You just took down a conspiracy that fooled the FBI." "I'm a good lawyer," Landon corrected, "but I'm a better janitor. Lawyers, they only see the case. They see the win. Janitors, we see the mess. We see what people leave behind when they think no one is looking." Landon put his hand on Cole's shoulder. "I'll take the expungement. I'll take my name back. That's enough for me." "At least let me pay you," Cole pleaded. "Name your price." Landon thought about it. He looked at his rusted Ford Taurus parked illegally near a hydrant. "My transmission is shot," Landon said, "and the heating in my building is terrible." "Done," Cole said. "New car, new apartment, done. And," Landon added, his eyes twinkling, "I want you to fund a legal clinic in Queens. Free representation for people who can't afford the fancy suits. People like me." "I'll build it," Cole promised. "I'll name it after you. The Jennings Center. No. Landon shook his head. Name it the janitor's closet. Keep them humble. Landon turned to walk away, heading toward his car. Where are you going? Cole called out. Landon stopped and turned back. He held up his mop bucket keys, jingling them in the sunlight. The trial is over, Mr. Knight, Landon smiled. But the court is still dirty. Someone has to clean it. He walked away, the invisible man who had become visible, the janitor who had swept away the lies, leaving only the clean, hard truth behind him. Landon Jennings proved that integrity isn't about the uniform you wear or the zeros in your bank account. It's about standing up when everyone else sits down. He lost everything 20 years ago for doing the right thing, and when the moment came, he did it again. Alexander Carter thought he was untouchable because he controlled the money. But he forgot that money can't buy the one thing Landon had in spades, the courage to speak the truth. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice can come from the most unlikely places, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that even the smallest voice can bring down the biggest giants. Truth cleans everything. Stay sharp.